گزارش‌های واشنگتن تایمز و کریستیان ساینس مانیتور از کنفرانس در کنگره آمریکا. واشنگتن تایمز 22 نوامبر 2013. نمایندگان کنگره و دیپلمات‌های پیشین روز پنجشنبه از رئیس جمهور اوباما خواستند به قول آمریکا نسبت به حفاظت از مخالفان ایرانی در عراق که در کمپ پناهندگی در وضعیت خطیری هستند عمل کند. آنها همچنین از وزیر خارجه جان کری خواستند با هر گونه معامله با رژیم ایران که برنامه مظنون تسلیحات اتمی آن را متوقف نکند مقابله کند. مارک گینزبرگ سفیر پیشین آمریکا در مراکش به گرد همایی در ساختمان کنگره گفت این یک بحران انسانی است که راه حل می‌طلبد. گینزبرگ و سایر سخنرانان که سالهاست از اعضای شورای ملی مقاومت ایران حمایت کردند از اوباما خواستند نوری مالکی را وادار کند 7 ایرانی مخالف را که در حمله اول سپتامبر به کمپ اشرف ربوده شدند را آزاد کند. در این حمله آدمکشان 52 ایرانی مسلح را به قتل رساندند. جان بولتون سفیر ملل متحد در دوران جوش توجه داد که مخالفان قول داده بود ولی به تعهدش عمل نکرده است. او گفت این خجالت آور است. این یک لکه ننگ روی حیثیت و اعتبار ایالات متحده است. براد شرمن نماینده کنگره از تحریم‌های قوی‌تر علیه رژیم ایران و از اقدامات مجازات کننده موجود که اقتصاد این رژیم را فلج کرده‌اند حمایت می‌کند. تتپو یادآوری کرد مخالفان 5 بار از سال 2009 زمانی که نیروهای آمریکایی مسئولیت حفاظت آنها را به عراقی‌ها تحویل دادند مورد حمله قرار گرفتند. وی گفت این مبارزه تمام نشده است و فراموش نخواهد شد. دینا روهراباکر عضو دیگر کنگره آمریکا از کالیفرنیا گفت باید به کسانی که علیه بی‌عدالتی و سرکوب مبارزه می‌کنند کمک کنیم. نماینده کنگره دنی دیویس گفت به عنوان یک فعال جنبش حقوق مدنی با آرمان ایرانیان برای عدالت سهیم است. وی افزود باید به مبارزه ادامه داد و تحمل درد و رنج پیش شرط تغییر هستند. کریستیان ساینس مانیتور 22 نوامبر. جان بولتون سفیر سابق آمریکا در ملل متحد که یکی از مخالفان برجسته سیاست دولت اوباما نسبت به رژیم ایران است گفت برنامه اتمی رژیم ایران از روز اول به طور بنیادی یک برنامه تسلیحاتی بوده است و چنانچه معامله‌ای با حفظ غنیسازی صورت گیرد می‌تواند رژیم ایران را در مسیر سلاح اتمی نگه دارد. بولتون افزود معامله‌ای با چنین کمبودهایی انجام گیرد مخالفت در واشنگتن خیلی سریع و مستمر است، لذا آنها به چنین چیزی دست نخواهند. نماینده کنگره براد شرمن نیز در جلسه مخالفان ایرانی در کنگره پیرامون موضوع پناهندگان ایرانی در عراق گفت قرار است به کاخ سفید برود تا تأکید کند که یک معامله بد را در ژنو نپذیرد.
کنفرانس در کنگره آمریکا. دخالت فزاینده رژیم ایران در عراق و سوریه، کشتار در اشرف، برنامه اتمی و افزایش اعدام‌ها. 21 نوامبر 2013، 30 آبان ماه 92. لین وستمورلند، نایب رئیس هیئت رهبری کنگره، عضو ارشد کمیته اطلاعات. رندی وبر، عضو هیئت رئیسه کمیته خارجی. دینا روهراباکر، رئیس زیر کمیته اروپا آسیا. قاضی تتپو، رئیس زیر کمیته تروریسم. براد شرمن، نایب رئیس زیر کمیته تروریسم. شیلا جکسون لی، عضو ارشد کمیته قضایی و کمیته امنیت ملی. دنی دیویس، عضو ارشد کمیته تحقیقات و نظارت بر امور دولت، چهره برجسته جنبش مدنی آمریکا. استیو استاکمن، عضو کمیته خارجی. و وزیر تامبریج، سفیر جان بولتون و سفیر مارک گینزبرگ.
A few days from now, the United States will be celebrating a very special holiday. It's Thanksgiving, and it's the day that we, as a nation and as a people in a free country, gather around the table and thank God for the wonderful things that we have. And how did we show our gratitude to God and show our gratitude to each other about how we so value freedom? When we allowed a head of a country to visit our country just recently and ignore the fact that his troops have committed murder against unarmed refugees at Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty. How could we possibly have let that gone by? I say that all of us who really value our freedom have to make demands on our government, and one of the demands is not to treat the mullah regime in Iran nor the regime under Mr. Maliki as a democratic government, but they should be treated for the gangsters that they are. We need to remember those folks, those people who are suffering at this moment and in jeopardy at Camp Liberty. They are the front line of defense for the free people of the world against radical Islam. We should never take them for granted, and that we should always let them know that we care for them. And finally, let us not shift blame to others all the time for what happens. And I don't say that I'm without fault. We're all at fault because there are people that are in harm's way at this time many of them could lose their lives. Now, I'm very happy that when I went to Iraq last time and I confronted Maliki with this, he kicked me out of the country. So I bear that as, of course, a badge of honor. So what should we do? What do we have to do to prove that we are sincere in our concern for these people whose lives are at stake? This has been going on for years now. What we have to do is finally admit that one of the reasons why the folks at Camp Liberty and those before when they were in Camp Ashraf were in great jeopardy is because the United States has not kept its word. We need to now move to make sure the United States keeps its word. I'm sure those brave people, with their courage and their integrity and their love of liberty and justice and their insistence on truth. Thank you all very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for your warm greeting. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to join with all of you. The coin of the realm, I think, in the world with which I was privileged, we had many meetings in this beautiful room. The coin of the realm in personal relationships, I think, is honesty. The coin of the realm in politics is if you say something, you mean it. I mean, I can speak from years of experience as a proud Republican, but occasionally I told my leadership no. When I said no, I meant no. When I said yes, I meant yes. So just keep that thought in your own head and in your own heart. For you as a person, as an individual, as a family member, or someone involved in the political process, how important is it to keep your promises? Two other thoughts. The number one terrorist state in the world is Iran. The number one terrorist state in the world is Iran. They are at the epicenter of every chaotic moment and event in the Middle East. They are supporting Assad in Syria. They have disproportionate influence in Iraq. And they support Hezbollah, which has not only armed forces supporting Assad in Syria, but responsible for a lot of the unrest and the challenges in the Middle East. Take a trip down memory lane with me, just briefly. Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Every morning I wake up, come down the steps, go to the White House, I get a briefing book. Sometimes we call it a threat matrix. Some days it'd be a couple pages, some days it'd be a couple dozen pages. It would be all the threats gathered over the previous 24 hours that the intelligence community was willing to share with me, listed threats against Americans or American interests here or abroad, terrorist threats. I will tell you, in my entire time in the White House and as Secretary of Homeland Security, not once did I see the MEK listed as responsible for a potential threat against the United States of America. Now, by the way, they were put on the Foreign Terrorist Organization list in 1997, as Ambassador Bolton and other people have said, in order to mollify the mullahs, to try to show them it's a matter of goodwill. And why did we do that? Because for the past, the reason they were given, ironically, the reason Saddam Hussein let them build Camp Ashraf is because the mullahs detested them, hated them, and they feared them. And by the way, under Ahmadinejad and Rouhani, who's now executing people at a faster rate and he's the moderate, than Ahmadinejad, and they've killed about 30,000 members of the MEK. So take that trip down memory lane with me. So when I leave, I'm proud to have served this country and my president in many different ways. And by the way, it'll become important for you to know at one time I was a soldier. So I leave the administration, and from the diaspora of Iranian Democrats, small d, the dissidents around the world, the leadership approaches and said, would you help? We've got a group who we believe is improperly listed as a foreign terrorist organization. By the way, you don't have to be a lawyer. Go check it out. Foreign terrorist organization. Take a look at the prerequisites to be on it. And if you did a little history check, you'd find they probably should have never been on it. But if you look at it carefully, it should never have been sustained until last year. And you don't have to be a lawyer to draw those conclusions. The law and the facts are pretty straightforward, but they're on it. And the goal of all their friends and family and relatives, frankly, the friends and family of a lot of people that got killed here a couple months ago, you ought to meet some of their sons and daughters and talk to them and ask them if their father was a terrorist. They said, we need to get them off the list. I do my own due diligence. I've got a little credibility. I used to be Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Do I want to be supporting an organization that I think is a terrorist organization whose ultimate goal is to do harm to the United States? I think the answer is, you know, it is not my goal, and it's not something I want to be associated with. We start having conversations, and I join an incredible group of men and women, Republicans and Democrats, military, diplomatic. You have no idea of the powerful picture it would be if you saw the assembled people, because we aren't R's and D's on this issue, we are Americans on this issue. This rises above partisanship in every manner, shape, or form. It rises above partisanship. I suspect we have R's and D's in the audience, and that's good, because this is not a political issue. It's an American issue. And I'll tell you why I think it's an American issue. Because around, I think it was 2004, once we've gone into Iraq and said, here's the exchange. You give us your ability to defend yourself, and we will guarantee you protection as protected persons under the Fourth Geneva Convention. There was no hesitation. They trusted America. Why did they trust America? Because we gave them our word that if they surrendered their own means of self-defense, we would provide that self-defense for them. How important is your word to you, to your family, to this process, and now I ask you, to your country? We take their arms. No incidents when we were in charge of security. Flash forward a couple of years, we have the Status of Forces Agreement in Iraq. We turn the responsibility over to Iraq to provide for the safety and security of 3,000 plus people who are protected persons under the Fourth Geneva Convention, and Maliki's government signs it. His word. When you get back to the office, Google Ashraf, April 2011. Have a strong stomach, because you'll see Humvees that we provided and troops that we trained enter Cap Ashraf and very meticulously mow down people like it's target practice. Remember, they have no way of defending themselves. That's not a Republican issue. That's not a Democrat issue. That's a humanitarian issue. And more importantly, our word has been, our credibility has been shaken. Our word has been broken. Today, as of today, this is April of 2011, nothing's gone on. Nobody's brought to justice. Everybody's kind of washed their hands of it. I could argue that if you wanted to send a signal to Iran that we're serious, we would do something very decisive with Minister Maliki, because it's apples and oranges, ladies and gentlemen. The notion somehow that if we keep these people subjected to a repressive regime in an unsafe condition, many people call it a concentration camp, somehow that means that the Iranians are going to be willing to make whatever arrangements or compromises we need as a country, and frankly the world needs, and the people left at liberty. 42 of them went from Ashraf. The others were killed. Some handcuffed. Some on the gurneys seeking medical care. How important is your word? How important is America's credibility? Two final observations I'd like to make to you and share with you. It is inconceivable to anyone who has observed what's going on in Ashraf and now at liberty, for the United States of America's State Department to conclude that the Maliki government is not responsible for what transpired. There's no reason you should know this, but you cannot get in and out of liberty. You couldn't get in and out of Ashraf, and you can't get in and out of liberty unless you go by multiple pre-positioned groups of troops from the Iraqi government. The world knows that Maliki was responsible, but the State Department's in denial. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Let's talk about those hostages. The State Department has told us they're not in Iraq. It's a convenient cover-up. If you don't think they were responsible for the incursion, you certainly don't want to claim that they got the hostages either, do you? But Amnesty International, and several of the previous speakers have spoken, have said that's where they are. And so you say to the State Department, well, if they're not there, where are they? Who took them? Have you inquired of the 42 survivors what transpired at Ashraf? It's an endless list of, frankly, misleading, disingenuous, pro-Iraqi, for whatever reason, assurances that they had nothing to do with it, and the whole world knows we're wrong, which tarnishes our credibility, in my judgment, even further. And by the way, let's not forget, 6 of the 7 are women. Not that it makes any difference, but the fact is, Maliki's troops are responsible for and involved in all 5 attacks. They know exactly where these people are, and yet we claim that there's no reason to blame the Maliki government. So I join in with the previous speakers. No aid, no support, nothing. And we can blame UNHCR, and the UN's got a lot of blame. Maliki's got a lot to people on his shoulders, almost crimes against humanity as far as I'm concerned. But at the end of the day, there's one primary reason that there have been 5 attacks, multiple deaths, hundreds of injuries. There's only one reason that the people protected under the 4th Geneva Convention have not been provided the safety and security that they deserved. There's only one reason that these men and women have not had the opportunity to be relocated out of Iraq and then to resettlement. And frankly, the United States has to look itself in the mirror. There's a lot of blame to go around, but at the end of the day, we gave our word. And every one of these individuals that died on September 1st, 2013, probably had in their letter, they may have been buried with it if they had a chance to be buried, the letter, everybody got an individual letter from the presiding general at the time that said you are protected persons and the United States is responsible for your safety and security. It's not a partisan issue, ladies and gentlemen. Maliki's government is responsible, and we look the other way. Maliki's government's responsible for the attack in September. We look the other way. Maliki's government's responsible for the detention and probably torture of the 7 hostages, and we look the other way. I'll go back to the question that I offered at the outset. How important is it to you as an American citizen? I don't care how you're registered. It's immaterial. When your country gives its word to a group of people who have surrendered their ability to protect themselves, is it important for us to keep it or not? If you have nothing else in the world of personal relationships, domestic politics, or geopolitically around the globe, it's your word. And if you don't abide by your word today, who can trust you to abide by it tomorrow? And if we are to be more engaged in the world and not less engaged, and somebody like me thinks that's what we have to do in the 21st century, then I say to all of you, if you have an opportunity to address this issue in one manner, shape, or form, if you're looking for just one simple reason, you don't have to know about the MEK, you don't have to worry about the FTO list, you don't have to worry about anything. Because at some point in time in their lives, these men and women, and they've been preceded by dozens of others, were told by the United States of America, we'll protect you. But for me, as an American, when we give our word, we ought to keep it. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And as well, let me thank Secretary Ridge, who has been a dear friend and who rightly has indicated that this is not a Republican or Democratic matter. It is one of humanity and dignity. Let me speak directly to my brothers and sisters and to the family members that are here of those in Camp Ashraf, Camp Liberty, that we are intertwined, that we will never cease in persisting for your freedom, for your dignity, and for your life. And I believe that Secretary Ridge made a very eloquent but potent statement that our word is our bond. If you look at the heinous conditions of flooding and poor roads, it is a disgrace to humanity. It is a disgrace to the dignity and the heritage of such great people. And it is clear that all of you who are in this room have been champions, but you have been bleeding figuratively for those whose lives are in jeopardy. And so it is important for us to let those who are listening have a sense that we are connected to them. In the last hearing that we had before Foreign Affairs, many of you may not be aware, I'm not on the Foreign Affairs Committee, but every time there is an opportunity, I'm glad that my colleagues respect me enough to yield the time to allow me to be there to pose the questions. After that hearing, I called upon the leadership of the State Department to provide me with a classified briefing so that I could hear in depth my words said are not classified, and so I can repeat them. I have pushed and insisted that the State Department not rest until the Iraqis who are held in a vicious hostage situation be rescued, and be rescued immediately. Immediately. We have had very tough times, but you have to not have a heart to be beseeched by family members. So I think it is important that we be reminded of the word and the bond, but that we be reminded that we have work to do. One, I want to see Iran disarmed, totally disarmed. I don't fault negotiators for trying to stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons. But what we are suggesting is that will never substitute for finding peace for the MEK or finding relief for those violated viciously in Camp Liberty and Camp Ashraf, or finding your loved ones and bringing the hostages home safely. But I believe it is important that we call upon the State Department, if it is the lead agency, to be able to take the message that is given today, that we are in fact our brothers and sisters' keeper. We cannot leave them abandoned. And to the Maliki government, who has received billions of dollars from the United States, but also precious treasure has been left behind in the loss of young men and women on the soil of Iraq, then I believe we have standing, as they say in the court of law, to demand immediately the release of these hostages. And Mr. Maliki, don't push me off by saying you can't do anything. You can do something, and you need to do it now. And we in the State Department must multitask and stand to be able to release your loved ones, and we will continue to be part of that fight. Thank you very much. We will not give up on them or their lives.
But thank y'all all for being here today. Appreciate my colleague from Texas's comments about the disarmament part. And so I was excited to learn that we've got friends here in Congress, that Congress has stood strong. This is my first term. I'm coming up to speed as quickly as I can. That the Senate and the House has stood behind the disarming of the regime over there. We need regime change. That's pure and simple. You can't sugarcoat it. You just have to call it the way it is sometimes. And I was also infatuated by the rich history and learning that, remembering back in 2009, Mark, that we missed an opportunity to be a voice of support, to be that voice, if you will, crying in the wilderness, saying, the people of Iran, rise up, and to use a Texas term, kick the bums out. You know. And so I exhort the administration, the president, I exhort the Congress, the House and the Senate to come alongside, and let's not miss that opportunity again. And then let me say that I was saddened to be reminded about the tragedy and the travesty in the camp there, where so many have lost their lives, and the 7 that were hauled off into captivity. Those in Iraq need to be held accountable. We need to track them down and bring them to justice and free those 7 hostages. We need to stand behind the commitment that was made to the residents of the camp back during the early days and do whatever it takes to liberate the Camp Liberty and Camp Ashraf. I don't want the country of Iran or the people of Iran to be held as a pawn in this current peace process that's taken place. So we have to be very, very careful and keep that in mind. We have a friend in the people of Iran over there. We've got to separate the people from the current regime. And we've got to make sure that we do everything we can to get that country back on its rich cultural heritage that it has, back on its feet, get that regime kicked out of power, and maintain a stable Middle East. And I appreciate y'all being here. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the time is here to wrap up. I want to summarize by at least leaving you with several calls to action. The fate of our relationship with Iraq and the fate of the hostages and the fate of the people of Camp Liberty and those who remain as the victims in Camp Ashraf and the bodies that are still not buried properly because Maliki refuses to let those bodies be given a proper Shiite burial. Remember that Camp Liberty is not a summer camp in the Adirondacks or the Catskills. It is the equivalent of virtually a concentration camp without security, without sewage. And when you see the photos that I see that the Iraqi government won't even let the rains drain from that camp in order to make the lives of those people as miserable as possible, you would say to yourselves, if it were me, but for the grace of God, go I. I think it's important for you to send a message not to a lowly Deputy Assistant Secretary of State who is a mere sacrificial lamb in the defense of a country and a government that doesn't represent the best interests of the United States. Who said that Mr. Maliki is a friend of this country? That's inexcusable, and he doesn't deserve to have one nickel of assistance from us while he does everything he can against us. Just as Governor Ridge said, he would never stand here and represent an organization or a people who did not warrant to have the safety and security of the government that he so proudly represented. And as a former U.S. diplomat, I would never be willing to put my reputation at risk if I did not believe there's a matter of important principle and important matter of interest and a critical obligation for us to do what is necessary. So please, you have better things to do. But you can't leave without calling on the President and the Secretary to do what is right. Not to do what is wrong and continue to do what is wrong. The buck doesn't stop with Mr. McGurk. The buck stops with the President of the United States and the Secretary of State. Happy Thanksgiving.